Hello, I'm Paul Pluta and welcome to Paul Pluta Prestige. Today I'm doing a review on the Rolex OysterDate 6694, and this is a very fascinating piece, and it's a piece in modern times a lot of people wouldn't have really been lusting after. But if you were a young man in the 70s, if you were a young Asian man in the early 80s, you would have lusted after a Rolex OysterDate. And the 6694 is probably the quintessential Rolex in the 70s and 80s. And a lot of people lose sight of the fact that smaller watches were the fashion and the flavor of the month. The 6694 is a magnificent piece of work. What it does is it comprises a Rolex manual wind watch with a date function in a beautiful waterproof case, and it was a fantastic package, and I've really always admired the Rolex OysterDate. And in modern times now, people say, oh, it's far too small, it's this, it's that. And I think the Rolex OysterDate makes a perfect boy-sized watch or a perfect watch for a female. The thing about the OysterDate is it uses a plastic glass. It's not using the sapphire. But it's still very modern in many ways. And one thing I've seen, if you have a look around the Singaporean watch dealers, the 6694 is really out of flavour. It's too small to be a man's watch and too awkward and dated to be a lady's piece. But I think the Singaporeans are really missing something very important here. And that's the fact that in the 70s, every successful Singaporean man wanted a Rolex OysterDate, and it was certainly a step down in price from the much more expensive Rolex Datejust, and it had that same look, same feel, in a smidgen smaller size. The Rolex OysterDate, it uses a bracelet which is 19 mils, whereas the Datejust itself, it uses a 20 mil bracelet. So, you know, it's a smidgen smaller than sort of the Air King, but it's in its day it filled a fantastic niche, and it introduced so many people to the Rolex brand. And it's sort of the equivalent, I suppose, in many ways to how Tag Heuer has introduced people into watch collecting. So, you know, anything that brings people into the hobby can't be a bad thing. And I've owned a few OysterDates, and I think they're a great piece to have. And the one thing I've seen that I really love is some variations in the dial. I've seen some beautifully repainted dials, very well done, in some really trendy, sexy colours. Yellow, blue, with Romans. It's just a gorgeous way to turn that piece into what I think is a really nice, modern piece for, to have as a beta or for your girlfriend. It's a Rolex. A Rolex is a Rolex. And I think the OysterDate itself, I've got two young boys, and I always make a habit of any of my children, once they become of age, they will get a Rolex. And I'm thinking for my two children who are 6 and 7, when they sort of start high school, I'm thinking, hey, Rolex OysterDate's probably not a bad way to go. And it's a Rolex, it's steel, it's got that beautiful oyster bracelet, and it's a nice entry into a nice, decent watch. Okay, let's get the score going. Okay, what do we give it on the Paul Pluta Prestige rating scale? For the brand, I'm giving it a 7. For the status in the range, a 7. For the movement, I'm giving it a 6. For For the quality, the overall quality of the piece, I'm giving it a 6, and the Paul Pluta Prestige rating, I'm giving it another 6. So that gives us a score of 32.